Okay, looks like we're recording, and I'm very happy to have my friend Cassie King on the program. Cassie is the press coordinator for Direct Action Everywhere, someone I've worked with for several years now. And Cassie, it's so great to have you on the program.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm flattered to be invited among great company.
Yeah, you're among great company. I've had Zoe Rosenberg on the program, Almira Tanner, Michelle Del Cueto, and a lot of people from DXC. So we have to go through everybody on DXC. But one of the main reasons that I specifically wanted to talk to you, and it's the same reason for Zoe and Almira, is because this program is that spinoff show from Wayne Chung's channel, and Wayne can't speak to you for a period of 2 years.
Mhm.
Um, this kind of crazy ruling handed down in Sonoma County. But I want to start in Sonoma County because you were, until the trial began, you were facing charges there. So you were facing serious charges and jail time in Sonoma County, and then the charges were abruptly dropped. But can you give me sort of the backstory about how you came to be facing those charges in Sonoma and how that played out?
Sure. Yeah, that could take the entire time that we have because there's a long backstory in Sonoma County. But
Yeah.
basically, Direct Action Everywhere is based in the Bay Area, right? International network, chapters all over, but founded in the Bay Area. And for the entire decade that Direct Action Everywhere has been doing investigations and open rescues of animals, we've been looking at Sonoma County because those are the closest factory farms to the Bay Area, the factory farms that supply animal products to grocery store shelves across the Bay Area, and also are really telling people and selling people the humane myth. And people are
Mhm.
buying it right up. Whole Foods and all these other places that are selling those products proudly and saying, not just local, which, all right, something can be local, right?
Mhm.
But that it's humane, that it's so natural and free range and cage free and all these other buzzwords. And so, yeah, we've been investigating facilities in that county since 2013, 2014. Yeah, 2014.
Mhm.
And so it's been a decade now, a decade of documented abuse that has been consistently reported to the authorities and consistently ignored. So, what we've been able to do, fortunately, is rely on just ordinary people who care enough to take action themselves. And when the government is failing, go to these facilities and rescue dying animals. And so we've done that on a number of occasions. And only then, when people actually rescue the animals and intervene and take nonviolent direct action to stop the abuse, do the authorities finally get themselves in order and do something, right? And that's when
Mhm.
they have come down with serious felony charges and arrested people in mass, brought in the buses, and just taken dozens and dozens of people away on multiple felony charges from some of these actions. So I'm one of the people who was at these rescues, and I guess because I also was in an elected leadership role in Direct Action Everywhere at the time, and I am now, that they kind of targeted people who they perceived as being in leadership. I don't
Mhm.
actually just guess that. I guessed that at first when we saw who started getting the
Mhm.
felony charges in the mail. But now I know that because there have been a series of talks and events in the county over the years where law enforcement has come to present to the industry and strategize together, basically be like, hey y'all, we've got your back, here's what we're doing, here are the charges that we're filing, here are the people that we're looking for who have licenses, like nurses and teachers who we can go after because they have a lot to lose, and we're going to cut the
Wow.
head off the snake and target the leadership to try to
Yeah.
kill the snake, kill the organization. Which I'm not offended to be compared to snakes because snakes have done nothing wrong. It's like
Yeah.
John Sackers, don't use animals as insults. They haven't heard that one yet, but it's offensive to all of us that they think they could take a few people out and that will just destroy the movement. So we're really trying to keep things going, even though they have obviously successfully prosecuted Wayne at this point.
Yeah, so they wanted to cut the head off the snake, and that meant people like you and Almira and Wayne, of course. Even though Wayne really wasn't at the time of I guess the second demonstration wasn't even a part of the direct action everywhere at that point, I think.
So
Or go ahead.
he'd stepped down from being the lead organizer, and Almira was the lead
Mhm.
organizer. He was still involved, but by the time he went to trial, he wasn't. And so,
Right.
things had because it took a long time to get to trial.
Yeah. So what were the charges that you were facing in this Sonoma trial?
Well, I was facing the same charges as Wayne and the other co-defendants in the case for 5 years, basically. We all had
Mhm.
7 or 8 felony charges hanging over us for 5 years. And those included multiple counts of conspiracy from the various actions, multiple counts of burglary, felony conspiracy, felony burglary from the various actions. At one point, there was a grand theft of fruits and vegetables charge, grand theft of
Mhm.
fruits and vegetables. And we were all like, wait, what did we do? How did that happen?
Whoa.
But we looked up the statute, and that was just where in the penal code domestic fowl were listed, lumped in
Mhm.
with food products. So that was bizarre, but they ended up dropping that. And basically, they kind of admitted that there wasn't enough value being taken, stolen from the facility to warrant a grand theft charge. And so they really pursued conspiracy and burglary ultimately at
Mhm.
trial. And then, of course, there were a number of misdemeanors as well, multiple types of trespass. That's one thing I've learned. I've learned so much about the legal system, but there are a bunch of types of trespass.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah.
can be charged with a bunch of types of trespass all at the same time for one action.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
Mhm.
yeah, you learn a lot looking at the legal system and going through these trials. Um, yeah, so I remember when you told me that they had dropped the charges, you told our group, and you were not happy that that had happened because you had been facing these charges for like 5 years and you were ready to
Mhm.
bring this to court. And so that's a very interesting dynamic that played out also like in Wisconsin when they dropped charges against Wayne. Wayne was also unhappy that that had happened. Um, Tell me about why you were upset and because most people, when they would no longer be facing serious charges, would feel elation, I would think.
Yeah, there's a couple reasons. One is that the impact of me being in the case could have helped the case overall. And obviously, more than my own acquittal or my own freedom, I want the case to succeed. I want the broader mission to succeed, and
Mhm,
more sympathy and more attention for open rescue and all of that. And I think the prosecution knew that, and that's why they dropped me from the case, because they thought it would streamline the case, take out one additional attorney who was representing me, although that didn't happen because he, jumped in on Priya's team with another attorney who was already representing Priya. So that's another thing I've learned is you can have multiple attorneys. There's nothing stopping you
mhm,
from that if you can find multiple attorneys who want to help or if you can afford it. But
mm,
basically, I was worried that it would impact the case to kind of whittle down the defendants to just the people they thought might be the least sympathetic for mostly just unfair reasons of, racism and ageism and, sexism. Like, oh, look at her. She's what, I'm 26 now, so I guess 25. She's 25 and, she looks sweet. She probably just wanted to help those animals versus someone like Wayne, where people maybe don't have those conversations. And that shouldn't come
mhm,
into play at all, anyways. But obviously, our legal system is totally flawed. And I think it's great we have a jury system. I think it's a very cool practice, but it's not immune to these human biases whatsoever. And
mhm,
neither are judges. But also, those things aside, Wayne was more involved in these actions. And I think that they thought, oh, if we can kick someone out of the case who wasn't as involved, and there's less doubt for the jury about, did they really pick the right people? Did these people really orchestrate these actions? Did they really have key roles in organizing the actions? Then it would be easier for them to get a conviction. But that just shows you how messed up it is that they loop so many people in on felony charges purely because of their role and visibility in direct action everywhere, even if they didn't have the evidence to convince a jury that they participated in organizing these actions. So, Almira Tanner and John Frohmeyer and others were in this case for years facing felony charges with, I think similarly to me, if they hadn't taken plea deals because of their own circumstances, they would have maybe gotten their charges dropped at the eve of trial like I did, just because the prosecution was kind of BSing, kind of
Hmm.
bluffing about what they actually had on these people.
Yeah. I think it's also this intimidation tactic. They think that these charges are going to scare people. But people in direct action everywhere, especially direct action everywhere leadership, have seemed to really come to peace with the notion of going to trials and using them basically as ways to get out the stories of these animals. So it's really not scaring people. And I think that there's probably some kind of frustration on their part that all these charges aren't really seeming to work in the way that they thought that they were going to work, including the convictions.
Well, I'll make a couple little corrections. One, I don't think we're coming to peace with the trials, because that kind of
Mhm.
implies that we didn't expect them, which is something that I don't want people to think. We've thought all along that we would be charged for what we're doing because we know the system is broken. And even though we believe what we're doing is legally right, we know that law enforcement doesn't uphold the laws the way that they should very often.
Mhm.
And so we've been expecting these trials, and we've been actually planning to do our best to mobilize and to use them to generate attention. And also, I don't know that people aren't afraid. I think that's the
Mm.
aspiration, but we are a really large movement of all kinds of people, as we should be, and we need all kinds of people in different roles. And I'm sure there is a lot of fear. And I think that's why they intentionally arrested people in public in front of a bunch of activists after Wayne's sentencing hearing, when they arrested Zoe and Rocky and Conrad, because they wanted everybody to see. I was like, oh, great,
Mm.
we got good video. I got to share with the press. It's like, okay, if my friends are going to get arrested, at least it happened with a bunch of nice cameras rolling. That was my thought.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think they were okay with that great video getting out there, because they wanted the intimidation effect of people being caught off guard by police coming in, and including plainclothes officers who were not clearly police coming in and suddenly handcuffing people within the crowd of protesters.
Mm.
So I'm sure some people are scared, and it's probably just a spectrum, like how
Yeah.
scared we are, but also the real thing is, will we let that stop us? Like,
That's a good point. Yeah. So, like, people in DXE leadership maybe have strategized around this, but you're saying, like, yeah, getting the video out, like, there may be some downstream effect where some activists may see that and think, like, whoa, I don't want to touch this. Yeah, there's a real danger to
totally.
that.
Totally. I mean, DXC is also very focused on building a community and building a base for mass movement protesting, because we know that trigger moments arrive, and in sometimes completely unexpectedly, and we need to jump on those, and we need to have enough people to be able to do that effectively, enough people who are already somewhat supportive, are already interested, and maybe they don't have a lot of time to give, but then something specific happens that motivates a lot of people to come together. And
Hmm.
so, even beyond our direct action work, every member of our community is incredibly important, and actually play roles that facilitate the direct action work and provide,
Right.
bearing witness to it and spreading the word on social media, and just literal community support, which is so critical for people like Zoe and myself. When I was facing charges,
Mhm.
I didn't feel the normal experience of facing charges, not only because, okay, it's a political case, so it's very different, but a lot of the steps were the same. I had to go to court whenever they told me to, rearrange my day for 10 minutes just for them to say, oh, no, never mind, we're busy, come back next week. And like all the
Mhm.
things that really wear you down in the legal system, they didn't work the same on us, because we had people there with us, because we had a movement behind us, because we had all that support. So I think, we're trying to build that community base for a lot of reasons. It's incredibly important. But people come in and sometimes say immediately off the bat, well, I don't want to get arrested. So, as if they need to state that right up front to, just like, oh, let me get this off my shoulders. I don't want to get arrested. Am I still kind of welcome in this community? And am I going to get arrested if I go to this protest that's on public property? And there's definitely fear from, like you
Mm.
said, what people see on social media and thinking that that's something that every person in DXC is going to face.
Well, maybe we should do our part to try to dispel some of that fear right now, because some of those questions that maybe you get from people when they are thinking about joining direct action everywhere, will I get arrested? What would you say to someone like that?
I would say, what do you want to do? There's so many ways to participate in the movement. And of course, anybody could. I want to be realistic that there's always a risk. You could get arrested at any group's protest unexpectedly. The police are a wild card, and we don't know what decisions they're making behind closed doors with federal or state leaders, and when they might crack down on a group that's completely nonviolent. We don't know. But definitely we do a lot of peaceful protests and a lot of other things, including some amount of legislative work, some public educational efforts, outreach, coalition building, building the connection between the animal rights movement and the environmental movement and other movements. There's just so many ways to participate, and I definitely don't want anyone to be turned away because they think that there's only one thing that Direct Action Everywhere is doing. Same with other groups. I don't want people to
Mhm.
turn away from other groups because they think the one thing they see on social media captures that entire organization or group of people.
Yeah, I have found, like in the animal rights movement, as you said, it's just kind of like, what do you want to do? Like, there are multitude of needs in the animal rights movement, and many of them that carry little to no risk whatsoever.
Mhm.
So people can help out. Like, for instance, like I've been helping out on the press team as well. That's a pretty low risk position. It's also
Mhm.
sort of the work that you're doing, Cassie, is sort of this bulwark against some of this, because, like, say if somebody is getting arrested, you're thinking about how we can get the word out to the press. So a lot of what you're doing is,
Mhm.
for every development in a case or something, even the ones that aren't super interesting, we're always like brainstorming, thinking, is there a way that we can get the press interested in this topic? Tell me a little bit about your press work and how you got started in that, and what you've learned and how you strategize around trying to get a press that has largely been uninterested in animal rights to finally start covering the topic.
Sure. Yeah. Any former journalists who are watching this who want to get involved in DXC, that's what I'll steer you to. I'll say,
Or
come join the
current,
press team.
yeah, or current journalists,
Or current
anybody.
journalists.
Yeah.
True. Thank you.
Mhm.
Good correction. Well, so DXC has a bunch of different working groups. Press is one of them, the press team. And that's one of the earliest working groups that I joined. I joined a bunch in my early
Mhm.
passion, and I have become more focused in my work, and I'm not involved in quite so many working groups anymore. But press team, I have been in since like 2016, I think, late
Mm.
2016. So it's been quite a while.
Wow.
And yeah, and in the past, Wayne and Matt Johnson were really leading press efforts, and I've learned a lot from both of them about how to craft a press release, how to contact journalists, just basic things like BCCing people and not letting all the journalists see how many other people you're sending this press release to, because that just looks unprofessional, to how to actually create a headline that could run in the New York Times. And certainly reading the news and being engaged in the news is part of learning all of that, because you read headlines, you read articles, you see what kind of things get published, and so you can kind of put your brain in that mode and think, what would the story be to a journalist? It's not the same as what it is to motivate the activist base that I'm talking to in other
Mhm.
contexts, or other audiences that we're talking to. So yeah, it's really just a different form of writing that I didn't learn in school, but I was majoring in English literature in at UC Berkeley when I joined Direct Action Everywhere. And so I think that's why people invited me to join the press team, which is kind of the
Mhm.
same thing I do today. If I see that there's someone who is excited and wants to give their time and they like to write or research or engage in the news, I'm like, hey, do you want to sit in on a press team meeting and help us find the right people to pitch and craft these personalized pitches that can explain to them why they should care about this topic or why it relates
Hmm.
to their previous coverage and expands on ideas that they're already interested in. So, yeah, I mean, it was a good fit. They were right to invite me, and I'm leading the team today with several awesome volunteers, including you. And I'm
Hmm.
so grateful for the help because press is very absorbing. It's definitely the kind of thing that feels like you're never done. You can
Yeah.
finish the press release and send it out. Sometimes, the trial ends and you've gotten the verdict and that's going to the press, but there's always more. There's always more people you can dig and find, and there's always more
Hmm.
crafting and feedback you can get. And so help is always needed, basically.
Hmm.
More op-eds and letters to the editor that you can write. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's never ending. And I mean, even with a press release, like you could edit and tinker with it for, all eternity. So there's a point where you have to like decide, okay, this is a finished product. I need to move on to something else. And a
mhm,
lot of the press work and what I've seen you are pretty good at is like this relationship building. Like you formed these working relationships with journalists at various news outlets, like some of the most notable of course being Vox, who just did that great factory farming series. And so a lot of it is just like being kind and professional, and writing these
mhm.
professional press releases for people. And what DXC and you are also very good at is just giving a lot of good information, like, so condensed information, like into a press release, but with a lot of links to the information that they're going to want
Sometimes
tailored
too
to
much information, right? Sometimes we're like, here's a play-by-play of everything that's happened in trial so far. If you want it, maybe one person does, but it's
Well,
there.
it's like you start writing a press release, right? And suddenly it's like 4 paragraphs long, and then somebody from the outside, and that's where like a team of volunteers is good, because somebody who hasn't been working closely on it can look
Right.
at it and be like, "Whoa, this is long,"
Yeah.
or very dense or something like that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
Michaela
so
can make me more concise.
yeah, yeah. It's nice to have all that feedback. And yeah, and that's one of those teams where it's been like one of those roles where for me, like having my roles shifted so many times during the course of our working relationship, it's also sort of let me do as much as I want, do as like sometimes I do very little, like where I'm just like attending the meetings and I'm like helping you guys, like giving feedback, that sort of thing. Which is another thing that I just want to like, I mean, obviously we don't want just people like joining and not doing any work or anything, but there are like various levels of like engagement is
Mhm,
basically what I'm saying. So for people who like want to get involved in DXC, there are questions of like, will I get arrested? You don't have to get arrested. You and and then you can also like kind of work at the level that you're able to work, because I mean, a lot of people who do volunteer work with DXC also have other jobs,
mhm.
and are able to devote some time, but not a ton of time. And that's all
Yeah.
very helpful. Um, what are some of the pieces that you're most proud of getting published over the years? Because there's been a lot of really cool ones.
Well, the first one that comes to mind is an opinion piece in the New York Times from Farhad Manjoo, who is no longer with the Times, but he was a regular columnist last year. And in March of 2023, or maybe it was February, right before the Foster Farms rescue trial happened in March here in
Mhm.
California, Farhad wrote a opinion piece, and it was their opinion was that rescuing animals should not be a crime. Rescuing animals should not be prosecuted, and went on to praise Alexandra Paul and Alicia Santurio for rescuing Ethan and Jax, and named them, both of these rescued birds, in the piece. Talked about the trial, talked about the momentum that was building for the right to rescue, and having that come out before trial, especially, was really valuable because it elevated the trial immensely beforehand and helped bring other journalists like the LA Times to cover it during the trial. And I was happy about that because that's somebody who we had pitched before. I know Matt had reached out to Farhad in the past too.
Hmm.
and just hadn't had the right story, or Farhad hadn't had the time, which happens. If you don't hear back from the press, doesn't necessarily mean that your pitch isn't a good one or the story isn't press-worthy, but journalists are very busy. They're in the middle of other stories, and sometimes the timing doesn't work out, but keep trying. If you have
Hmm.
other good stories that might be up their alley, keep trying, because that's part of what made it so rewarding, was that it was like, finally, we've gotten this to work. And also that someone who would be writing an opinion piece, so you can't really know how the piece is going to turn out. You're pitching them on what you think the angle is, but you can't really know how the piece is going to turn out when it's somebody's take on the trial and take on the right to rescue. And so you're just waiting
Hmm.
to see what their take will be. And the take was, y'all are right, and rescuing farmed
Hmm.
animals from
Hmm.
abuse is not a crime. And then of course Alicia and Alexandra were acquitted, and the jury agreed with Farhad and with many others who believe rescuing animals is the right thing to do. So that was very rewarding, for sure, that that all panned out.
Yeah. And that speaks to your perseverance because, and I know now, like being on your side of the press, because I had been a journalist before, but trying to pitch the press is a whole different ball game. And you deal with a lot of disappointment because you will work on something for a while,
Yeah.
send it out, and then not get any response or get like
Yeah.
a quick dismissal or something like that. So
Yep.
um, I've been impressed with how you don't let those stop you, like those minor disappointments that you may feel throughout the day. Like, damn, that press release was so good and nobody's responded to it. And
You know,
sometimes it's just go ahead.
I also get really excited when someone responds even to say no,
Yeah.
because it's like, wow, somebody read the thing, they thought it was worth considering, and they said, "Sorry, I'm too busy," or
Uh-huh.
"Sorry, this is a little bit out of my field."
Right.
Okay, great. Somebody responded.
Yeah. And that's also an opportunity to follow up even with them and say, like, say, okay, well, we'll swing back around for another time or something like that. We'll keep you in mind, something
Right.
like that.
Mhm.
Because journalists not always are hearing that kind of back and forth dialogue with someone. So yeah, that's great. The Farhad Manju piece, and that shows that some of these people writing for more mainstream publications like the New York Times, that the message is starting to seep through, and it's been challenging because I guess, I mean, it's not really a new idea, but it is sort of a novel concept to the mainstream way of thinking in our world. This idea of animal rights, it just seems sort of novel for people because the
Mhm.
press, who should be so on top of things, seems to be like just getting a hold of it. It's like a new topic for them that they haven't pieced together yet. Um, have you witnessed during your time in press more of an interest from the media in animal rights topics?
Yes and no. I think
Mm.
that sadly, it's still a lot of the same small number of journalists who really dive into these issues, like Marina Bolitnikova and others at Vox, who have really made factory farming a central focus and are dedicated to bringing these stories out to the light.
Mhm.
And so it's great to have those stories can build on each other, and their knowledge base is incredible. But part of what was exciting about Farhad covering was that it was a new journalist covering animal rights and covering DXC's work for the first time, and kind of a breakthrough in that way. So yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes I feel like there should be more people that we have this relationship with at this point who have covered the right to rescue or animal rights at least once, and come to mind when we're thinking about releasing investigations or pitching trials. So that's probably not surprising. I mean, to you, you're on the press team, but to other people, probably
Mhm.
not surprising. Probably other people experience that too. Like, why is there not an animal rights or animals beat for every major newspaper? Why are these animal stories shoehorned into the environment section? Sometimes that
Mhm.
makes total sense. Sometimes it could really go either way, depending on the story. But other times it's not about the environment. except for
Hmm.
being about animals who live in this environment with us, and they just don't have their own section. So we still
Yeah.
have so far to go, and the state of media is depressing. So I'm not sure what direction things will go, if it will be a lot more YouTube channels and podcasts and alternative media, or if
Mm.
mainstream media will have some wake up call, some reflection that leads to this transformation and animal rights getting its own platform. And if that happens, I think it will be largely because of our movement, but also because of outlets that are leading the way on that, like Vox, and legitimizing that that amount of attention to this very deserving topic. But on the flip side, yeah, I do see that there's at least more awareness when I'm talking to journalists, or when they're corresponding with me over email. They know about Proposition 12. They know about some of these key context pieces that are relevant to what I'm talking about and what I'm pitching them on. So it's not like they're coming from a blank slate without knowing about the animal rights movement's history at all. They do,
Right.
yeah, they do have, they're connecting these different pieces, or COVID-19 and pandemic risk from factory farming. They'll bring that up, and so there
Hmm.
are these
Hmm.
pieces that are more present in their minds.
Well, and sometimes they bring that up because you made that point to them.
True.
Because, yeah, that's partly sometimes in our meetings, like what we're thinking about is what are the angles that the press might be interested in covering this topic for? Because animal rights touches so many different things, like you mentioned, the pandemics, the bird flu, that's going around dairy farms, even. Um, so just to shout out some of your work, because just in the few years that I've been working with you, some of and add to my list. So I'm just thinking from my memory. We've hit National Geographic with Rachel Fobar,
Mhm.
The Intercept with Natasha Leonard, of course Vox and all the great work that they do. But one of there's been tons of really cool
Andy
pieces.
Greenberg at Wired covered the release
That's
of the
right. That's right.
investigation manual right after Wayne was convicted, and that was a really powerful story to come out to show that this playbook is out there for people to learn more.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
these are major publications. I mean, so even when we talk about the disappointment that we sometimes feel because we want to see more coverage, and
yeah,
it's still, you're still doing amazing work and getting into these publications that really add a huge amount of legitimacy to the work that you're doing. Because when people are seeing, like, oh, they're covered favorably or seriously in National Geographic, this is something to pay attention to. Yeah,
totally.
I do think that we still have a populace that still looks to this sort of legacy media um,
Hmm.
for credibility and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Um, so you said you got started in press in 2016 with the press team, and it sounded like at that time you were just so energetic about um, doing everything. You said you joined all these different working groups. So I want to go back even further into your bio just to see where this passion for animals came from. But let's like inch our way back and just say, like, like when um how you got involved in direct action everywhere, or did those two things happen fairly concurrently, or
Hmm.
well, let me know.
Yeah, so I actually got involved in direct action everywhere in 2016,
Oh,
in
okay. Yeah.
January of 2016, during my freshman year at UC Berkeley. And the stars just aligned for me in a very lucky way, because I came up to college with certain values around animals, and I found a roommate on a Facebook group for people searching for roommates because they didn't already have someone that they wanted to live with. And you can just say, give me a roommate randomly, or you can apply for housing with a roommate named. And so rather than go the random route, I tried to find someone who shared more things in common with me. And I found someone who was like, hey, I'm going vegan because of all these things. And I didn't even know about all of those things. I was vegetarian, and so was she. But basically, the first day of meeting her in the dorm rooms, I think it was the first day, it was very quick. She said, well, now that I don't live with my parents and I'm responsible for my own food, I'm just going vegan. And she showed me dairy is scary.
Hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know all this. I care about animals. It makes perfect sense. And fortunately, we were able to join the Animal Rights Club on campus together. So having a friend, I never had that awful, lonely vegan experience that I feel so sorry for people for having, because
Hmm.
I got very lucky by having a buddy through that experience and joining the Animal Rights Club, where of course I met Kitty Jones, who was in her senior year when I was in my freshman year at UC Berkeley, and she was the president of the Berkeley Organization for Animal Advocacy, the Campus Animal Rights Club. And I loved her right away. She is, for anyone who doesn't know her, she's so bubbly and so welcoming and so kind and so
Yeah.
generous and so energetic and so sweet, and just one of the best human beings you'll ever meet. So again, I got very lucky because
Yeah,
Kitty
I agree.
welcomed me into BOA. And of course, she was already involved in Direct Action Everywhere off campus as well. And so she
Oh,
told me,
there's a snake. There's the snake connection right there.
ooh, yeah, but I don't think anyone's called BOA a snake. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
not that I know of. But yeah, just things happened very quickly because Kitty told me about DXE. And at the time, there was no animal rights center in Berkeley yet. That's the first center was in 2016 when DXE got it, but late 2016 or so. And so in early 2016, my roommate and I took the bus to Oakland, to an apartment building in Oakland, to go to the Saturday morning meetup. And those
Nice.
continue today, but now we have such a nice space in the Berkeley Animal Rights Center.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was, things just worked out really well. And of course, everyone there was very welcoming. And because I was coming with that energy of having just learned things and,
Mm,
coming to college where you want to learn things, and you're saying, teach me, I want to learn, and I want to change the world, and I want to figure out what I'm doing in this world. And it was
mm.
just yeah, it was a time when it made perfect sense to me to dedicate efforts to activism, especially as I learned from a group about social theory and the effective ways to create change. And it wasn't just go and yell your feelings into a void, or go and yell because it feels good, which it can feel good, but
Mhm.
basically, here's our strategy. Do you want to be a part of it? Do you want to join these working groups? Do you want to participate and give speak outs at protests and write blogs for the website and join the press working group and all these other things that let me put my energy and my skills to use? So
Yeah.
here
So you had that freshman in college energy where you were like a sponge. You wanted to learn all these different aspects. And so did you join all these different groups to sort of be like, I want to learn about this and this and this and this and this and see where best I fit?
you mean beyond animal rights, just other clubs on campus? Or do
Well,
you
no,
mean
I meant
working
I meant
groups?
in DXC, the working groups, but I guess, yeah, beyond that too.
Yeah, I quickly got a lot of my time absorbed by animal rights because it made perfect sense to me. I've always loved animals. I already, if we're going to inch backwards more, we can talk about it, but I already came
Mhm.
loving animals and caring about ending suffering. So that took most of my time. I did participate in some other things. I had a really cool experience of teaching SAT prep to high school students through a program at UC Berkeley, where UC Berkeley students are kind of trained on how to teach that and then go
Mm,
into local high schools where people maybe can't afford private tutoring for the SAT, but want to take a few weeks of classes and practice and get feedback on their essays and things like that. And I've always wanted to be a teacher. Since I was 5, I wanted to be a
mm,
teacher, and in some ways that's happened, not the way that I planned, but that was a really
mhm.
cool experience as well, to meet people in the community and help them prepping for the SAT. And yeah, I like teaching. I like training. It's another thing I do.
Yeah. Yeah, that
I
is something
guess.
that you do on the press team, because a lot of people join the press team, like, have no experience, and you are a bit of a teacher, it's now it's interesting to see, like, where some of your skills have come from. Do you think that that experience teaching the SATs was something that taught you a lot?
I think it taught me a lot of skills that even including just believing in myself and trusting myself and being more comfortable in that setting, because I
Mhm.
was only 18, 19 at the time. I was not much older than the students, but I would take the bus over and walk into this high school as one of the, you know, teachers.
Mhm.
Not really, I wasn't a certified teacher, but that's kind of how it felt, and stand in front of a classroom of students and give them personalized feedback and stuff as well on their writing. So I do think
Mhm.
it helps solidify seeing myself in that role. I also took classes in the education department at UC Berkeley while I still didn't know that I would end up just doing activism full time, and I still thought I might be a
Mhm.
teacher, right? I was taking classes in the education department that also involved going to local elementary school and
Mm.
doing like basically helping them with their homework after school stuff. But
Mhm.
yeah, those were really rewarding experiences and helped me know that that's something I probably would still enjoy doing if I get around to that at some point in my life. But there's
Mhm.
so much. I mean, I also learned like trying to juggle these different things at the same time. I also worked in a clothing store, and that was not that rewarding,
Mhm. Mhm.
unsurprisingly, right? It was okay. I learned how to
Mhm.
fold t-shirts and sweatshirts and everything pretty well.
That's good
But
for a trial. Like, you gotta get the clothes all, in the suitcase, and you don't wanna have to be dealing with, like, wrinkles that
yeah, sure. But
it helps, it helps.
yeah, but I had so many things going on that it helped me realize where I really wanted to focus my time, because when I was other places, folding shirts or in class even, and I love school. I've always loved school, which is why I wanted to be a teacher, to stay there forever. But even in classes, my brain was just thinking about animal rights activism, thinking
Mhm.
about DXC's next campaigns and strategy and projects and rescues. And of course, those kinds of things, once I got involved in them, were very, they just change the way you see everything around you. And it
Mhm.
feels so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, throughout my life, I agree, like, some of the jobs that I've taken have been informative just to tell me, like, I don't wanna be here. I don't wanna do this. Um, yeah, so let's go back further in time, to discover, where your passion for animals came from and why you were so concerned with animal suffering.
Sure. Well, my family is they're wonderful people. They taught me really good values. They sent me to Catholic school from a kindergarten through high school. So there was a K through 8 Catholic school I went to, and then I went to a Catholic high school. And
Mhm.
all my life things were pretty black and white, which is harmful too, but did have the advantage of really oversimplifying that I always want to do the right thing, not the wrong thing. So if in my
Mhm.
life I would learn that something was the wrong thing, it just felt like, oh, well, then I don't do that thing. That's kind of
Mhm.
how my goody two shoes narrative has come to be, because that was how I wanted to be. I wanted to be good. I always wanted to pick the good thing.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Mhm.
there's some funny videos on DXC's social media about that. If you want to see my profile video making fun of me in my little Catholic uniform and everything. But
Yeah, yeah, please send that to me after.
okay, yeah, you can show a clip. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, it was helpful because I had good role models in my parents. I went to great schools. I had good friends with good values, and I always wanted to kind of do the right thing. And I cared about
Mhm.
animals, and I would try not to step on ants when I was walking with my family, because
Mm.
I don't know, it's just like they're ants. Like you don't, they're animals. You don't want to step on them, and
Mhm.
little things like that. That of course my family points out to me now, now that they know where I've gone, and they're like, "Do you
Mhm.
remember not stepping on the ants?" And all the little things that they tell me now. But
That's beautiful, yeah, yeah. I mean, 'cause like, a lot of kids, like, I mean, some kids would, like, torture ants with, like, the magnifying glass and stuff,
yeah,
and yeah, I still do that. I'm sure you do that to this day where you're like, I try to look where I step. I don't wanna
yeah,
step on an ant.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, it slows me down. Sometimes you're in a hurry to get somewhere and you're like, well, I can't, like, I can't just run. I saw a roly poly a minute ago, so I have to, go really slow. But it's worth it. Yeah.
Roly polies are awesome. Yeah.
They are, they're really cool. So, yeah, I always loved animals, and actually wasn't until I was in high school that somebody gave a presentation. I don't remember what the assignment for the presentation was. I don't even remember what my presentation was. But I
Mm.
remember in high school, somebody gave a presentation about animal testing,
Hmm.
and it was so clear to me that that was a immoral atrocity
Mhm.
that was cruel and wrong. And I went home and I threw away anything that was tested on animals, including my parents' stuff, and they were annoyed. And it just got me thinking about another thing to know about me is I'm very scared of needles and blood and going to the hospital and surgery and all the things that come with needles and blood. Just don't
Mhm.
like it. And so I would just lie awake thinking about animals in cages and testing facilities whose entire existence was this thing that scared me more than anything else. Like if I had to get a
Mm.
shot as a kid, I didn't want to know until the last minute, like knowing if I knew, okay, next week I'm going to get a shot. That whole week I was so scared just for a shot. I know
Oh,
it's
wow.
irrational, but
Mm.
yeah, I'm really scared of needles. And
Do you know why?
they're needles, they're sharp and they're scary. What do you mean? I don't know. Even now, like, yeah, I just don't like.
Yeah, you
I don't like it. I think it's irrational for sure, the extent to which I'm scared, but at least it's one of those phobias that has some amount of irrational base,
mhm.
like heights.
Yeah.
You could die falling. So I
Mhm.
don't know, but basically, I was just my empathy just swelled because I was lying awake thinking about animals living through the thing that was the scariest thing to me in my very sheltered, privileged life, just having to go to the doctor to get a shot,
Mhm.
and that would be that their entire existence was like the waiting to get the shot that I hated, and the
Mhm.
waiting, not knowing what would happen to them if they'd be blinded or stabbed or burned or whatever because of all these things that are totally unnecessary. And yeah, that got me really caring about animals. I had a dog since I was 12 named Jasmine, who my parents and brother and I adopted and from the shelter. And so I would think about Jasmine in that situation and think about
Mm.
myself in that situation. And it just really, really helped me empathize. And one other thing I did around that time when I was throwing away all these products tested on animals and wanted to know, all right, if I'm going to buy anything else, what's it going to be? What's okay to buy?
Mhm.
Was searching on the internet cruelty free products, products not tested on animals. And of course, do you know what came up? Like what had the best resources? What group?
PETA.
PETA. Yeah, of course. And so here I am getting this really valuable information that I was desperate for from PETA. And
Mhm.
PETA's website or their motto, their slogan says right on top of the website, animals are not ours to use for, okay, I'm sorry. I should actually know this a lot better. Sorry, PETA. But it
It's
just
probably
lists
gone
all the
through iterations. Yeah.
it lists all the
Food,
things, right?
entertainment. Yeah.
Animals are not ours to use for entertainment, food, clothing, etc. And I
Mhm.
can remember, because it's not that I wasn't that young, it was high school, but I can remember like the moment that I read that and in my mind the justifying that happened about food and thinking like, yeah, they're not ours to use for clothing. We don't need that. There's other things to wear. Yeah, they're not ours to use for testing. That's so messed up. That's cruel. Yeah, they're not
Mm.
ours to use for entertainment. What? How gross. Oh, food? Well, but we actually need to eat animals. That's what I thought.
Mm. Mm.
So it was still a little bit later before, everything happened in stages. Everything took time,
Yeah.
but I think that is how it is for a lot of people.
I think so. That's interesting that it was like animal testing that got you on that path because do you still remember the presentation and like what they were talking about? Like was it like very explicit? Were they talking about these horrible things that are being done to animals or this is in high school, so I imagine it wasn't too out there. I mean too like graphic in its descriptions.
Yeah, I doubt that they actually showed video footage. I think it was just photos.
Mm,
But yeah, it was definitely describing the procedures and things that are done to animals. And, for people who don't know, that includes injecting them with things, force feeding them toxic chemicals, putting things in their eyes that burn, shaving their fur and putting things on their skin that burn their skin. And
hmm. Do you
yeah.
remember the person who gave the presentation?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm not really in touch with her anymore, but I
Mhm.
can remember that. It's like one of the strong memories I have from high school, and I actually have a really bad memory overall. I think
So
it's
do I. Yeah.
okay. Sometimes people will tell me something from when they were in, like, 1st grade with vivid detail, and I'm just shocked. Just like
Mhm.
For me, it all blurs together, but I think it's partly because I lived in the same house and I had the same friends and I went to the same school from kindergarten through 8th grade, and then a lot of us
Mhm.
went to the same high school, so maybe that's part of it is, like, there aren't moments that really like, before and after. Of course, now
Mhm.
there's COVID, and I can usually remember, okay, was this pre-pandemic or post-pandemic or
Yeah.
pre-joining DXC or post-joining DXC? That's another one. But in my youth, I don't really have those big shifting moments besides, I guess, starting to care about animals.
Yeah, that one. I'm wondering if you've ever reached out to her and let her know like the impact that she had, because I think back to like the woman who I met in a bar who showed like encouraged me to watch Earthlings. I'll never
Yeah,
meet that woman again. And if I had had the chance to be able to tell her like what an impact she had made on my life, that would be really cool. So I wonder if you could reach out to your friend. That might be, well, I
yeah.
guess, a long lost acquaintance at this point.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that in your first episode of this series. And,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think at the time I told her something, but I mean, I hadn't become an animal rights activist like this, so I could try to find her now and let her know.
It'd be
That's a
kind
good
of
idea.
cool because she could also maybe she could write like an opinion piece or something, and it'd be interesting to just see like, is she like an
You
animal
got that
rights
press
person?
mindset on.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I'm I'm so used to, us like brainstorming topics and things like that. So yeah, that might be cool though. I mean, it's cool as part of your story. And by the way, I should say like this is torture for you because you don't really like to talk about yourself. And here we are going through your bio. But I mean, that's kind of one of the cool things that I'm finding like doing this podcast and talking to you and Zoe and Almira. It's just it's interesting. Like, it's not like we're super, super close, but we've been friends for a long time.
Mhm.
And I haven't really had conversations like this with most people in DXC because people in DXC, and this is to their credit, they're very mission oriented. They're thinking about
Yeah.
what we need to do. So most people in DXC aren't really that interested in talking about themselves. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm that interesting. I definitely think the most interesting things about me are the work that I'm lucky enough to be a part of. And I think I even did it at the beginning of this podcast or this episode where you asked me about my own charges and what led to me facing charges, and it was just immediate. Well, Direct Action Everywhere has been investigating Sonoma County factory farms for a decade, and it's so much easier
mhm,
to speak about this group that I'm part of, but I'm also genuinely in awe of what we achieved together.
yeah.
And being able to kind of boast about that is so much more natural to me than boasting
Well,
about myself.
I think you're extraordinary, and I think most people like watching this podcast would also think you're extraordinary. And I think it's very interesting that you find yourself like to be very ordinary, because you're doing extraordinary things. And so it's always interesting to like find
Mhm.
how a person came to that. Um, it's very interesting to hear about like your freshman year in college and how like that alignment happened. Were you able, like during those college years, were you able to balance out the work that you did with DXC with like also going to classes and stuff? Like, were you still like a serious student at UC Berkeley?
Yeah, I was, and I actually graduated in 3 years, although I was
Oh,
initially
wow.
planning to do it in 4, mostly because I became so absorbed with activism that I wanted to finish
Mm,
getting my degree because I didn't like feeling torn in so many directions. And just the more, that was my freshman year, I first got involved. So the more involved that I got with time, participating in investigations and talking to journalists and being given emergent leadership opportunities. And actually also being elected to the 5-person core team while I was still a student when I did not vote for myself. That was
Oh,
a very
wow.
cool experience because it showed me that people in the community wanted me to be in a leadership role. And
Hmm.
I didn't know people felt that way about me to that degree. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, I felt compelled to step up more and more. And then even though I love school and I learned a lot, it just felt less important to me if it wasn't going to be a stepping stone to becoming a teacher or going to graduate school and becoming a professor or something else that I had at some point considered doing. It felt like, well, if once I graduate I'm going to become a full-time activist, why don't I get to
Mhm.
that sooner? So I was taking a lot of classes.
So forgive me if you said it already, but when you were in college, were you studying education or what was your focus?
So I was majoring in English. I took some
Mm,
education classes, but I didn't end up doing an education minor. I also
mhm.
took a lot of Spanish classes because I love it. And
Oh,
had
interesting. I didn't know
finished,
that.
yeah, so I had finished, well, I took Spanish in high school, Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 3. So when I got to college, I took Spanish 4 equivalent, basically, which was, I think, the last purely Spanish language class that UC Berkeley had. And then after that, it became Spanish literature or other things taught in Spanish. And so that I was really excited about because I loved learning Spanish and I wanted to be able to take other topics like literature in Spanish. So I also did those classes, which helped because I mean, part of what I needed to graduate was just a certain number of units. I think
Mhm.
120, like a lot of units. So it some of the classes I took, it didn't matter what they were. It was helping me get my units. So I took my Spanish literature classes, and that was
Mm, nice. Yeah, so you had like all these different interests in so when you started DXC and joining all these working groups, it doesn't surprise me that you got elected to leadership because I guess when you join all these leadership groups, then people had a chance to work with you. A lot of different people in the organization had a chance to get to know you and see your
Mhm.
working style. And in the short time that I've known you in these past few years, you strike me as someone who's very serious and but also very easy to work with, someone who's very easy to talk to. So yeah, I
Oh,
think you're just yeah, I could see that if other people were seeing that, if that's how you were back in the day, like you're definitely the kind of person that people would want on a leadership team. You also have great leadership abilities and didn't like I feel like during the trial there was this we were talking about how you had taught like a your class in Catholic school or
yeah.
something. Can you tell me that story?
Sure. Well, like I said, I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 5, and I think I was vocal about that. I think people knew. So, and of course, when you're a kid, people just ask you, "What do you want to do?" And I guess most people don't necessarily know, but I was like, every year was the same thing. So people kind of knew that Cassie wants to be a teacher. And
Hmm.
I had a great teacher in 6th grade, and we would have writing assignments where people's task in the time they were given was to write a paragraph using certain vocabulary or using certain starting sentences with a list of adverbs so that we'd learn how to use these adverbs or grammar concepts. Basically, people could write whatever, but have to incorporate these different words or grammar concepts. And I would just finish that really fast because I read so much and did a lot of writing. And then my teacher was like, well, Cassie, you can just like walk around and help everyone else with theirs and kind of explain what these things are when people have questions about it. So during
Hmm.
these writing sessions, I would just kind of take over. And I thought it was
Hmm.
so fun because I love writing and I like grammar. And I know that's nerdy, but I like rules and I like order. I do, despite how
Hmm.
chaotic some elements of my life are.
Hmm.
It's kind of like that black and white thing too. Like this is good and this is bad. So, you know,
Hmm.
protect animals, don't abuse them. Get
Yeah,
the
it
grammar
should
right,
be.
don't get it wrong. Oops, sorry. Check my
You need to, yeah, you should teach kids that age again and teach them, yeah, get your grammar right. Don't abuse animals.
like those two things are on the same class of importance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a really fun experience being given that opportunity to being empowered, which
Hmm.
is how DXE was as well, empowering me. And yeah, I just feel really lucky in my life that things worked out pretty well for me in coming to UC Berkeley and being in kind of the right place at kind of the right time. You know, DXC was founded
Mhm.
in 2013 and I joined in early 2016. So I wasn't there since the beginning, but
Mhm.
at a time when it was really blossoming and people were needed to fill key roles. I was given these opportunities, and the emergent leadership that DXC practices is something I really love, and I want to
Mhm.
practice it myself. And it's hard because sometimes I don't delegate the best, as you know, but I really want to empower people in the same way that I've had teachers and friends and colleagues empower me.
I actually kind of disagree. I think you're pretty good at that. Like I think you do give people opportunity to step up and be leaders and take more roles. I mean, I see that every week in the press meeting. You're sort of like, offering up tasks to people, and it's every one of them is an opportunity for somebody to sort of step up and own a
Yeah.
different role. And yeah, so it sounds like you've always been pretty studious and hardworking and brilliant. I keep embarrassing my guests by saying that they're really smart. It's like making them like talk about themselves. But I most of the people that I interview, I think are like really incredibly intelligent people. So anyway, I think you're also a very smart person. Sorry to make you cringe. Um, but do you think that some of that came from your family? Like, what were your parents like when you were growing up?
Yeah, definitely. My mom majored in theater, and she actually is the executive director of a nonprofit, and she's a total workaholic. And she vents
Mhm.
to me about the same things I vent to her about. And it's really funny. My dad's like, you two are so similar. You know, she's like the Almira of her organization because she's got to manage all of the compliance and grant requests and the
Mm,
staffing for that group, for that organization and everything,
mhm,
but still very similar things that we relate to. My mom, I get a lot of things from her for sure. And since she majored in theater, and I should say the nonprofit is a super cool group. Look it up, Playwrights Project. What they do
mm,
is they teach people to write plays and then they bring in professional local actors to act out the plays for people to see their words come to life. And my mom, for the
mm,
last, I don't know how many years now, I think she started when I went to college, but yeah, she for several years now she's been teaching in prisons in San Diego, which is where I grew up. And so they will do theater exercises. They will create just a totally different atmosphere in the prison. And then they will have the incarcerated people there write plays that are often based on things that they've experienced or things that they're struggling to express, and then have professional actors act them out, including like outside of prison for the public, bringing in videos, and sometimes in the prisons too. So just
mm,
a really amazing thing that she's doing that really dignifies the stories that all of us have to tell. Like, we all have something to say. We all can be writers. We all have voices. And yeah, but my mom would read to me a lot growing up, and she does amazing voices for all the different characters. I
Oh,
try to
cool.
do this. It's so hard. Have you ever read aloud to someone, Jeremy, and tried to like distinguish who's talking because you're reading aloud so you do different voices?
Oh yeah, yeah. I definitely have. Yeah.
I end up just they all become the same, or I have like one guy voice and one girl voice, and that's it. But my
Mhm,
mom would you would know when the sentence started who was speaking before it said the name of the person. And so it was kind of like having a play when my mom would read to me. And I think that's part of what made me love reading and want to
mhm.
invest so much time in that.
Yeah, so she's like basically a performer. She's really good, like almost like a voice actor, and that's really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
she
so
is
you
a good
mentioned,
actor.
yeah, this is her. That is a really cool thing that she's doing, especially for people in prison. Like they're getting to like write these plays and then see them come to life, like see their vision come to life with these professional actors
Mhm.
doing it, which is really a cool thing because a lot of our ideas just stay ideas and they don't get out. Um, So
And
yeah, that's
nobody asks and nobody cares. Nobody says, "What's your
right.
story? What do you know, what's your creative outlet? What can you
Hmm.
produce?"
Hmm. So
Yeah.
you said that your mother instilled in you this sort of a love of reading. What sort of books do you read? And I've been doing this with my guests more lately of asking them like what books do they like and what do they recommend, especially activism and even non-activism related.
Okay, well, I mostly have the non-activism related side down here because, yeah, I love to read novels. I don't know how many people watching this will want to read these novels, but if you also like them, I can recommend some.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, please do.
okay, Michaela just gave me such a fun age because she read it and she really liked it, and I read that book and it was really funny and sharp.
Such a
It,
fun
it's
age.
a yeah, such a fun age. It's kind of like a
Mm.
satirical look at racism and class privilege, and it's a Reese Witherspoon book club pick, which usually tells
Oh,
me I'm gonna like it, and I did.
interesting.
Yeah,
Are you a fan of Reese Witherspoon?
yeah,
Yeah,
I like
nice.
yeah, and I like her taste in books as well.
Didn't Legally Blonde, I heard this. I didn't see the movie, but I believe Legally Blonde 2 was about animal testing. I heard that. Am I wrong? I saw
I
like I looked up
can't
this
remember
list of
Legally
animal
Blonde 2.
rights movies and like I think Legally Blonde popped up as one that was a surprising addition.
I know I've seen it, and I can't remember what Legally Blonde 2 is actually really about, but I need
Hmm.
to go rewatch it.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
might be. But
and
anyway, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's fine, thank you, I wanna go check it out. And also, I have been reading a lot of science fiction over the last few years since reading Octavia Butler's books with
Mm.
Parable of the Sower and other books that she's written. The Xenogenesis series is amazing.
Mhm.
Like these mind expanding concepts really fascinate me because they're just things I've never thought about before or
Mhm.
possibilities that seem like, how did you come up with that? The inventiveness of them really entertains me. And then the most recent science fiction I've been reading is the Three Body Problem series, which you
Mhm.
might know from Netflix because it got made into a Netflix show.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Three Body Problem was great, but the second one, The Dark Forest, even better. So if you're going to read
Oh,
them,
interesting.
you read, yeah, I'm reading the third one now, but continue reading the series. And
I
do you know
started it.
you started it, the show?
I started the book before the
Book.
show was in existence because I got these books for my dad, I think, as a gift, and, then I started reading. My dad really liked Three Body Problem. Also, that first scene in the Three Body Problem, the book and the show, actually, I watched, like, the first episode, is really interesting, portrayal of, like, the Cultural Revolution in China. Um,
Mhm.
so, yeah, that's something that I have some interest in too. So,
Well,
yeah,
I'm
that's
glad
a
you're
cool
reading
book.
the book because I was gonna say that the series, because I did watch the show after reading the
Mhm.
first book, but the show actually pulls elements from multiple books.
Oh, does
So
it? Oh,
if
okay.
you read the first book, you might still wanna wait before you watch the show because it has things from book 2.
Oh,
Not
gotcha.
I
Is
mean,
the
I
show
didn't, it's
good? Do you
fine.
like the show?
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
did. And I
Oh,
think
that's
it's
good.
gotten a lot of awards. I don't really keep up with that, but I saw some headline about it getting nominated or getting a lot of awards.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, we got on the topic of these books before I finish talking about your activism, because I do want to talk about how you've taken part over the years in some of these really bold demonstrations and stuff. And it sounds like, it sounds like you were someone who didn't want to break rules, but then you're becoming like the face of like some of these like really demonstrable activism that a lot of people get unhappy with. So how did you um how can I frame this question? How did you become someone so bold
Mhm.
and found the courage? And was that natural for you, or did you struggle with that at first and have to grow into it?
Well, I think the biggest transformation that I had is starting to question authority more because
Mm,
I grew up lucky enough to not be presented with a lot of reasons to question authority. I had really wonderful parents and good teachers and a safe community and all of that. And so I felt like, well, if someone tells me don't do drugs, it's because drugs are bad for you. Why would I do them? I don't understand these kids who do drugs when it's everyone around us is telling them that they're bad, telling us that they're bad, things like that.
Mhm.
So I kind of just accepted rules without thinking about it because I didn't have a lot of reason to question them, or I didn't think I did. And there were just things along the way that made me start to realize these people I think are so smart, these people in positions of power, these people I'm taking at their word can be really, really, really wrong. One
Mm.
of those things that is just kind of funny before I get to the more important ones is like I had religion classes, okay, because I went to Catholic high school. And so, yeah, I had to take
Mhm.
religion class for 4 years, a little bit of a waste given all the classes you could take. 4 years of religion was a lot, but it was
Mhm.
interesting. But yeah. Um, and at one point, I remember us talking about heaven and souls and who goes to heaven, and people asking questions and pushing back a little bit and asking, that people who haven't been baptized wouldn't go to heaven. But what if they've just never even heard about Christianity? What if they've never even had that opportunity? That seems pretty messed up. And
Mhm.
just avoiding using curse words here. Messed up is obviously an understatement, but to say that
Mhm.
somebody, just because they didn't have this experience, wouldn't ever have the opportunity to end up in heaven. Obviously, I don't believe those things. I've changed a lot and I don't believe all of that. But
Mhm.
even at the time, I didn't believe that. Like, there were things as I was really a part of the church that I didn't believe. And at the
Mhm.
same time, when we were having that discussion, I was like, well, what about animals? Like, animals have souls. And my teacher in my religion class saying they don't have souls and they wouldn't go to heaven. And that
Mm.
I knew. I was like, you're full of crap. Like, of course,
Yeah.
animals. What would heaven be without animals? Like, who would want a
Yeah.
heaven where your companion animals can't be there with you? What are you talking about? Like, of course, animals go to heaven.
Yeah.
That just, that was like,
Dumb.
yeah, it was stupid. I was like, okay, I don't believe that. And anyway, so yeah, that was, high school was when I learned about animal testing. I learned all these things. I started
Yeah.
questioning things more. But what I didn't tell you is, like, when I actually stopped eating animals, it was when Proposition 2, the ballot measure in California that prevented or prohibited the most intensive confinement of animals, including battery cages for egg laying hens. Basically, when that law, it passed in 2008, it didn't go into effect until January 1st, 2015. So in my senior year of high school, already I loved animals, and you know I'll just skip over things in between. But at that point, my dad was reading the news and he said, Cassie, like, you'll be so happy to hear this. As of today, chickens have to be able to fully extend their limbs inside their cages.
Hmm.
And I just kind of looked at my dad for a really long time, like processing the words that had just come out of his mouth. I'll be so happy to hear chickens couldn't extend their limbs, but now they can, but they're still in cages. And this is the progress that we're
Mhm.
making. Like, this is the big progress that has just happened, is animals can now go like that,
Mhm.
with their
Mhm.
limbs. And I was kind of like, Dad, what? You're telling me that that's good? That makes me question everything. That makes me not trust anything. Like, what?
Mhm.
And then I just stopped eating animals, and I told my dad that. I was like, and I still didn't know that that was about egg laying hens. I didn't have enough
Oh.
information until well, it was like a year later, basically, when I was at college and met my roommate. But yeah, it was surreal to me that my dad, who is an amazing person and super smart guy, and I love him and I trust him so much,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
he and my mom and others have really guided me in the right direction for so much of my life. In this one area, I felt like I've been totally lied to. I've been totally duped. I didn't know animals were being treated so badly that the most progress we could make for them was to let them have enough room to put out their wings.
Wow.
And I couldn't trust any labels anymore about that.
So that was the moment that you turned vegetarian?
Yeah.
Wow. So wow. That's interesting. Yeah, so he probably thought he was telling you like this, oh, yeah, this great thing, like, this progress, and you were just like, that actually sounds
Mhm.
absolutely horrific and
Mhm.
terrible. Mm,
Yeah, and I just started questioning things more, I guess. And then
mhm,
obviously it wasn't long before I was in college and I was very primed to question things at that point. So that was, yeah.
mhm. Yeah. And so, were you always someone that was bold? Because I mean, I'm thinking of like having done some of the interviews now with Zoe and Almira, like a lot of, I've been going back through all the footage and a lot of these like really bold protests, and you're a part of a lot of them. Um, were you someone who was like outgoing, like where you weren't you, or did you have to like grow into your voice? I mean, I guess like maybe this goes back to like you teaching the class and like getting up in front of people at the Catholic school and like
Yeah.
really almost being like an authoritative voice.
Yeah, I think so. I think that those early experiences helped me with things just being comfortable speaking in public or being comfortable being looked to for advice in a leadership role. So I do think already once I joined DXC, I had some comfort with those kinds of things of, I didn't need to hide in the shadows. I would be okay if people listened to me give a speak out or things like that. I was a little more comfortable with.
Mm,
But as far as, breaking the rules or doing things differently, I think it just depends what I believe. I stopped thinking, well, what is the arbitrary rule, and started thinking, what is my rule? What is my moral right and wrong, my moral compass on this issue? And at that point, the right thing to do would be to speak up for animals, and the wrong thing to do would be not to. So
mhm,
when I'm a person with a lot of conviction, I guess. So when I had the conviction that something was wrong, I wouldn't do it. And when I had the conviction that something was actually right, I would do it, even if it seems uncomfortable. And to me, it's like I'm still living by kind of strong rules, but the rules have changed.
mhm. Where do you find like the courage to get through those moments that feel uncomfortable to you? Is it just like you just think of the animals, or what is it?
Yeah, I do when I would be doing disruptions at like a bacon fest in Oakland and things like that, where there would be a lot of animosity. I can remember that to focus and to not really absorb things that people might be yelling at us or tension that was happening, I would be thinking about pigs that I had seen in Smithfield factory farms and thinking
Mhm,
about the animals themselves and just sharing who they are as individuals and how they're not bacon. So definitely in times of like stressful situations, it can be helpful for me to think about the animals. Other times, I mean, it's just you're on a mission. I think when the stakes are so high, beyond just a protest or disruption, something that's an
mhm,
investigation or an open rescue, of course, that's stressful. Of course, that the stakes are even higher, so it's even scarier. But at the same
mhm,
time, because the stakes are so high, the adrenaline and the hyper focus kick in, and you don't need to distract yourself with other thoughts. I hear this from most other people that I know do these kinds of investigations, which is not what I primarily do at all. I'm really focused on communications, but from
mhm,
the investigations that I have participated in, I've felt that feeling too of you're not distracting yourself, you're just like completely absorbed with the task at hand.
mhm. So, with the investigations that you have done, are there moments or specific animals or anything that really like stands out to you as that really sticks with you? Um, like, I don't know, maybe the worst thing that you've seen, or just something that really stays with you?
Well, probably the animals I think about the most are my bunnies because they're with
Oh,
me all the time and I love them so much.
nice. Who's
Yeah,
that?
Jonah.
That's
I,
Jonah.
I don't really want to make him sit on my lap. I just wanted to show you. But
Yeah.
yeah, Jonah and Mabel are the two animals that DXC has open rescued who live with me. And I
Mm,
think about them a lot because I know that every animal has a personality like them. They help me see that
mhm.
because I know their personalities so well. And
Yeah.
when I am driving through Oakland and I drive past the slaughterhouse where we rescued Jonah, and they have this sign outside with a bunny and a lamb and a chicken and a quail, advertising that people can come in and buy these animals and they'll be killed in the kill floor in the back. It's like a fresh meat thing.
Mhm, mhm,
I get really sad driving past that place because I think that there are other Jonahs in there and they
mhm.
could be being killed right then. So I think, yeah, it's like close to home and that makes it really hard. Fortunately, I don't have to drive past that place that much, but when I do, I just get really sad. And um, yeah, I really want that place to shut down, but I know that that's personal, right? It's not like the most strategic campaign target. It's just where my own companion animals have come from. And Mabel, we rescued from a fur farm when we were campaigning to ban fur in California, and that succeeded. So California banned the sale of fur and fur farming, and the place that was raising Mabel for her skin can't do that anymore to rabbits. So
Mhm.
uh, yeah, so I think about the bunnies a lot because they give me a lot of the full spectrum of emotions, like the the sadness of seeing bunnies in cages the day that we rescued, well, both the day we rescued Jonah, waiting to be slaughtered, and Mabel also was crammed into a cage with other
Mhm.
bunnies. There's a just dead bunny on the floor under the cage. Just like this is how people treat these animals when they're commodified for their skin and for their flesh. And when I think about how completely differently I think about Jonah and Mabel, yeah, it helps me see like this is what animals experience now and this is what they could have. And even then it's really not what they deserve. Like they should be free. They shouldn't have been domesticated to be in this situation.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
they're very loved and they're happy and at least like it gives me a lot of hope to see we made that transformation happen for them and we can make it happen for other animals and we are making it happen for other animals. So I think about
Yeah. Well, Mabel and Jonah are inspirations, and I've experienced it a little from my time living with Wayne. How when we would wake up like with Oliver there, having an animal around who has been rescued from a horrific condition can like give you a lot of joy and a lot of
yeah,
hope. And it's also kind of a kick in the ass too, because it's like, don't forget what we're
yeah,
doing. Um, that's
totally.
interesting. Yeah. So Jonah and Mabel, it's a good, it's a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about rabbits because I haven't really talked much about rabbits, and a lot of people don't know um, much about what rabbits are used for, and the fact that there are even rabbit slaughterhouses. I mean, a lot of people that will be
Mhm.
news to them.
Yeah,
Um, can you tell me a little bit about like the rabbit industry and what they're used for?
sure. Well, rabbits are the third most common companion animal in the US. So, after dogs and cats, they are an animal a lot of people share their homes with and a lot of people have compassion for. And I
Mm,
think that's why people don't hear about or know about the terrible things that happen to rabbits in actually several industries. So, cosmetic testing, for one. Rabbits don't have tear ducts, so they can't flush things out of their eyes. So rabbits are often used to put chemicals into their eyes because they'll sit in their eyes for a long time and
mm,
show what will happen if you get this shampoo in your eyes or whatever, you get this chemical in your eyes. So they're completely taken advantage of in the cosmetic testing industry, and not just cosmetic but testing animal experimentation in general. And also, obviously, I mean, people know this, that rabbits are small and fairly docile, or most of them. Mabel is, I didn't pick up Mabel because, the vet says she's a tank. In comparison to Jonah, she's a
Right.
little bit harder to handle. But yeah, basically, they're like beagles and other animals used in experimentation, they're easier to handle and manipulate and abuse just because of
Mm,
how small and vulnerable and kind they are. And similarly, they're actually a common fur animal, which I think a lot of people know. But yeah, fur animal like mink, foxes, chinchillas, rabbits, bunnies are used in the fur industry as well. And then for meat, which maybe is the least known of these things, but rabbits kind of have it really bad because they're commonly abused in all of these different industries, and yet people don't hear about it that much, despite how much people love rabbits. And so I think it's like a wobbly linchpin, to use that terminology, in the animal
Yeah.
abusing industry, that people, I actually know several people, this wasn't my journey, but I know several people in DXC and beyond who adopted rabbits, learned to love rabbits, and then that launched their development of animal rights feelings, and got them involved in animal advocacy. So I do think that
Mhm.
there's a lot of, potential there for storytelling, and meeting these individuals and getting people to think about, if it's wrong to put them in these situations, if it's wrong to slaughter Jonah for meat, if it's wrong to skin Mabel for her fur, then what about all these other animals as well? And
Mhm.
sometimes I do take them outside, not that often, but when I do, and people, see them and go, "Oh my gosh, are those bunnies?" And
Mhm.
then of course I tell them the story about how they were rescued, and they're like, "What? At a slaughterhouse?" Just like you said, Jeremy, I think people don't
Mhm.
realize that, yeah, people do eat rabbits. There's a butcher shop in Berkeley, the local butcher shop, that sells rabbits, and other butcher shops in Sonoma County and elsewhere that do. And people are kind of horrified, and I latch on to that, and I'm just like, yeah, isn't it terrible that these animals are in these cages waiting to die and then slaughtered for no reason, when they all have personalities? That slaughterhouse
Mhm.
also has chickens and quails and lambs, and none of them want to die. So
Yeah, exactly. Well, I didn't even know much about rabbits. I read this book, Not as Nature Intended, by this former undercover investigator who is based out of the UK, I believe. And he had a chapter about investigating a rabbit slaughterhouse.
mm,
And so I haven't refreshed my memory on that part because I didn't know we were going to talk about rabbits. But I I do recall him saying something that people would be shocked at the number, the basically the scale of rabbit slaughter. And I think he was talking about the EU, but probably
mm,
worldwide, but that it was like one of the biggest meat industries in the world or something like that. Which, yeah,
yeah.
living here, you wouldn't realize that
Yeah,
because
I
it's
think
not very
Faunalytics has
common.
published some bar graphs and data recently showing like slaughter number of animals worldwide. And I don't
Mhm.
remember the numbers, but I remember being surprised about how high it was for rabbits.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, rabbits are so sympathetic. I mean, like you said, they're kind and sweet. And when you're driving on the road and you see like a rabbit on the side of the road, it's always like, for me, it's like kind of like a, oh, like it's one of those
Yeah.
moments because they're so beautiful. And
Yeah.
the idea that they're used in this way is
Mhm.
terrible.
They're also
Well,
used as gifts. People buy rabbits as gifts around Easter or the springtime. And then when people don't want them anymore, they realize they're more work to care for than they thought, then they abandon them. So,
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, well, I know you need to go soon, but I do want to just quickly say, like, and ask you about just really quickly, because I know a lot of people who casually follow DXC may know you from the satirical videos that you do, which are a lot of fun. How did the idea for those get started? And then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. So I used to be on the social media working group. That's one that I have left to focus more on press and general
Mhm.
communications work. But back when I was on the social media team with Zoe Rosenberg, who led the team and still does, we would always be brainstorming different ideas. And, I think it was maybe triggered by thinking about Facebook playlists and how playlists of videos were more a thing, or at
Mhm.
least for some reason we wanted to make serial content. We were like, we should make series. So we were brainstorming ideas for something that could be not just a one-off video, but a repeat success, hopefully, which ended up
Mhm.
happening, which was great. And
Mhm.
yeah, I'm pretty sure I was the one who said, what about product reviews? Like,
Yeah.
people watch product reviews. That's a category of thing that people seek out, but we could just steal that terminology and that idea and do product reviews that are truthful about animal products, and
Mhm.
started writing sarcastic scripts. And they did well. The first couple actually did not do that well, but after, by like the third one, they started doing incredibly well, and they've gotten millions and millions of views, which is great. And some people have joined DXE who found out about DXE from those videos, which I always think is super cool, because I'm not even
Mhm.
talking about DXC in the videos, but obviously they're posted by DXC. So if you see it and then you're like, what is this page that posted this? And you click on DXC, then you'll see all our other stuff. So yeah, I don't do enough of those though. I've gotten so busy with other things that Zoe's like, when will you write another one? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, you should do more of those because they're really funny. I like them a lot. Well, and we also did not talk about the Sonoma ballot measure. I know you need to go though, but let me just quickly mention that, a lot of work that's happening right now is featured around this ballot measure in Sonoma County to ban factory farms, the worst factory farms there. And there's a convergence happening. I'm going to see you in a few days, and that'll be a lot of fun. But I will make sure that we link to all these pages, like the Yes on J measure and all of that. But I just want to say, Cassie, you've been so great to work with over the years. You're such a great inspiration to me, and DXC is so lucky to have you. And just thank you for all you've done for animals.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you for all your help on the press team and as a legal intern and investigator and all the things that you jumped into with trials. I don't even know all the titles that you got, but thank you for wearing so many hats.
Yeah, no problem. And right now I'm wearing the hat Free Paul Watson because he's still in jail. So everybody go and make a post for Paul Watson. All right. Thanks, Cassie.
Bye, Jeremy.
Bye.